Shadow work is one of the most vital and transformative practices in Jungian psychology. At the core of Carl Jung's understanding of the psyche lies the concept of the shadow, those parts of ourselves that we reject, deny, or remain unconscious of. The shadow is everything we don't want to be, but are. It includes emotions we disown, impulses we suppress, traits we deem unacceptable. And yet, paradoxically, it is in facing the shadow that the journey to psychological wholeness begins. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In other words, spiritual and psychological growth does not come from avoiding darkness, but from encountering it with awareness and courage. The shadow is not evil in itself. It is morally neutral. It is the unlived life, the repressed truth, the silenced potential. When left unacknowledged, the shadow projects itself outward, onto people, ideologies, and groups, fueling prejudice, conflict, and self-sabotage. But when integrated, it becomes a source of vitality, creativity, and power. Shadow work is the conscious engagement with this part of the psyche. It begins when we observe patterns in our lives, emotional triggers, repetitive conflicts, irrational behaviors, and ask not, "What is wrong with others?" but "What is this revealing about me?" In dreams, the shadow often appears as figures of the same sex, antagonistic or mysterious, sometimes monstrous. In waking life, it can manifest as envy, judgment, shame, or irrational attraction and repulsion. Jung believed that until we confront the shadow, we remain fragmented, ruled by unconscious forces. He stated, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort." This means that shadow work is not simply an intellectual task. It requires emotional honesty, self-reflection, and humility. The ego must be willing to relinquish its image of superiority and perfection to embrace a fuller picture of the self. The process of individuation, the journey toward the self, cannot proceed without shadow integration. The self, in Jung's psychology, is the totality of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious. It is our true nature beyond the ego. The shadow is the first threshold to this deeper self. We cannot access our divine or higher nature without first passing through the underworld of our own psyche. In myths and fairy tales, the hero must descend into darkness, face dragons, or descend into caves before retrieving treasure or wisdom. These stories reflect a psychological truth. Transformation requires descent. Shadow work is this descent. It is not comfortable, but it is liberating. To do shadow work, one can begin by journaling about projections. What irritates you in others often reveals an unconscious trait in yourself. Dreams can also be powerful guides, tracking and analyzing. Shadow figures with symbolic awareness can yield profound insight. Art, active imagination, and therapeutic dialogue all help give form to the shadow so that it can be seen and integrated. Jung emphasized that the goal is not to eliminate the shadow, but to bring it into consciousness. He wrote, "The shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door, whose painful constriction no one is spared who goes down to the deep well." He also noted that the shadow contains 90% pure gold. This means that beneath the rage, shame, and fear lie the parts of ourselves that were once full of life, our creativity, our power, our spontaneity, that we learned to hide in order to be accepted. By reclaiming these lost aspects, we become more whole, more authentic. We stop living according to false personas or rigid ideals and begin to live in deeper alignment with the truth of who we are. Shadow work is not just psychological, it is deeply spiritual. It is an alchemical process of transformation in which the dark lead of the psyche is gradually turned into gold through consciousness and integration. Without this work, no real spiritual insight is possible, for we would be building on a foundation of denial. In today's world, where so much is projected outward, onto politics, culture, social media, shadow work is revolutionary. It invites us to take responsibility for our inner world and to participate in the collective healing by doing our individual part. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means embracing our contradictions and living from the center of the self. Shadow work is the first and most necessary step on that path.